This is the voice of the Lord, your God, my beloved child. Listen carefully if you trust in God. Type Amen. There are some truths that cannot be heard through the ears, they must be felt by the soul. This is one of them. What you're about to realize is not an accusation, not a confrontation, but a revelation. A divine unveiling of something your heart already sensed, but your love for them silenced. You loved them too deeply to question. You held them too closely to suspect. And yet, in the quiet corners of your spirit, something always felt off. You couldn't name it. You didn't want to believe it. So you buried it under benefit of the doubt, under years of trust, under the weight of loyalty. But heaven sees what you cannot. And now, without judgment, without anger, Jesus has brought you into this moment not to shame the one who hurt you, but to free the part of you that's still imprisoned by their silence. Heaven is revealing it gently, not because you are weak, but because God honors the depth of your heart. He knows how much you loved. He knows how much you gave. He knows how long you prayed for them behind closed doors. He knows that even now, you don't want to believe they could be holding something back from you. But truth isn't betrayal. Truth is freedom. And the truth is, they have hidden something. Not because you weren't worthy to know, but because they didn't want their shadow to be exposed in your light. Your presence was too honest. Your heart was too pure. And purity often terrifies people who survive through manipulation. They weren't afraid of you, they were afraid of being seen by you. What they're hiding is not just a secret, it's a weight that has shaped how they've treated you, spoken to you, withheld from you. You blamed yourself for the coldness. You questioned yourself when they pulled away. You thought, maybe I'm too much, maybe I'm not enough, but it was never about your worth. It was about their wall. They couldn't love you fully because they never let you into the room where their truth lived. They smiled in your face while locking a door behind their back, hoping you'd never knock. But your spirit always knocks. You're not someone who just takes words at face value, you feel. And now, what you felt is being confirmed not by them, but by heaven. Jesus is not exposing this to break you. He is doing it to break you free. Free from false responsibility. Free from the emotional guessing game. Free from the burden of proving your value to someone who already knew it, and still chose to hide. What they hid from you wasn't just an action. It was a fear. A fear that if you knew the whole truth, you'd walk away. But what they never understood is that your love wasn't fragile. Your love was fierce. Your love could have handled it. Your love would have stood beside them in honesty. But instead, they chose silence. They chose image. They chose comfort over clarity. And now, their choice has created distance. Not because you failed them, but because their truth failed your trust. Yet in the middle of all this, God is not asking you to fight. He's asking you to release. Release the need to have every answer. Release the desire to be validated. Release the part of you that's still waiting for their confession. You don't need it anymore. What you needed was the truth, and heaven just gave it to you. The very thing they didn't want you to see is what God has now revealed. And that's not betrayal. That's protection. Because God never lets the hidden stay hidden when your heart is clean. He won't let you keep building on a foundation made of secrets. He's too kind for that. He's too close to you to let deception feel like love. So now what? Now you breathe. You let yourself feel what you've been denying. You stop apologizing for noticing what no one else would admit. You forgive yourself for the times you lowered your voice to keep them comfortable. You allow yourself to grieve the version of them you loved that may not have been real. And then, you rise. You rise not with bitterness, but with clarity. You rise not to punish, but to protect your peace. You rise not to run from them, but to return to yourself, the version of you who never needed lies to feel loved. This is not about revenge, this is not about shame. This is about reclaiming your emotional freedom. And Jesus is here in the middle of it. Not as a judge, but as a healer. He's saying, you didn't lose them, you found yourself. The person you trusted the most didn't destroy your ability to love, they revealed your capacity to heal. And that healing begins now. You gave your loyalty in full, not in pieces. You gave your time, your silence, your energy, your prayers, your support, your secrets. You gave what many people beg to receive and never earn, unconditional belief. You didn't love halfway. You loved as if their soul had a home inside your chest. You saw their pain, their flaws, their mess, and still you stayed. Still you fought for them. Still you defended their name even when they weren't defending yours. Still you spoke gently about them when others spoke sharply about you. Because you trusted. Because you believed that your loyalty would lead to their honesty. You believed that if you held space for them long enough, they would feel safe enough to be real. But the truth is, they already felt safe, they just didn't feel ready. And readiness cannot be forced. Readiness must be chosen. And sadly, they chose silence over transparency. Distance over healing. Image over intimacy. And now, you're left with the echoes of things unsaid. Moments that didn't make sense. Changes in behavior you tried to explain away. Conversations that felt slightly off but were wrapped in smiles convincing enough to pass. You felt their absence while they stood beside you. You sensed the withdrawal while they claimed nothing was wrong. And still, you gave them the benefit of the doubt. Still you blamed yourself. Still you held on to the idea that maybe if you just loved a little harder, they'd open. Maybe if you gave them more grace, they'd tell the truth. But now Jesus is saying, it was never about how much you loved them. It was about how little they loved truth. Because truth cannot hide in real love. Truth may be messy. Truth may be hard. But truth never avoids the one it claims to care for. And when someone chooses secrecy in the presence of your sincerity, they are not protecting you, they are protecting themselves. What they're hiding may not be something scandalous. It may not be evil. But it's sacred. And sacred things, when hidden without trust, become weapons. Not weapons that scream. Weapons that cut you quietly. That's why you started doubting yourself. That's why you started feeling like you were always on the outside of something. Because you were. There was a room in their life where you were never allowed. A part of them that never let you all the way in, even though you gave them full access to your soul. And that imbalance became a silent war. A war you fought by being softer. A war they fought by being silent. And now, the cost of that silence has reached your spirit. That's why this message had to find you. Because your heart needs closure, but their words won't give it. Your soul needs clarity, but their version of the truth will always be edited. So heaven is giving it to you directly. Not with accusation, but with compassion. Because God loves you too much to let you carry confusion when He holds clarity. He loves you too much to let someone hold a version of you hostage in their silence. This is not about making you suspicious. It's about making you whole. Whole enough to stop blaming yourself. Whole enough to stop wondering what you did wrong. Whole enough to walk away from false comfort and step into sacred certainty. And the certainty is this: you were honest. You were loyal. You were real. And that will always carry heaven's approval, even if it never gets theirs. You didn't lose them. You simply outgrew the version of them that refused to be vulnerable. And that is not failure. That is freedom. Because now, your spirit knows. Now your heart can breathe. Now you can stop pretending that everything felt okay. Now you can stop minimizing your intuition just to protect their secrecy. Your discernment was not drama. Your gut wasn't exaggerating. Your soul was speaking, and now God is confirming what it said all along, that something was being hidden, and you deserve to know, not because it changes who you are, but because it releases who you've been holding back. So don't suppress your emotions. Don't silence your sighs. Feel what you need to feel. Cry if you must. But let every tear water the seed of the new strength being born in you right now. Let every breath remind you that you're not crazy, you're connected. Connected to the Spirit. Connected to divine truth. Connected to a God who sees behind every curtain and still chooses to heal you gently. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to chase closure. Because when God gives clarity, that's all the closure your soul will ever need. You're free now. Not because they told you the truth, but because heaven did. And heaven never lies. There comes a time in every heart's journey where love is not measured by how tightly you hold on, but by how freely you let go when truth reveals itself. And this is that moment for you. You are not standing in pain, you are standing in awakening. The kind of awakening that doesn't scream, it sighs. The kind that doesn't beg for clarity, it recognizes it. Because now you're no longer chasing explanations. Now you're no longer stuck in the cycle of, maybe they didn't mean it, maybe I'm reading it wrong, maybe it's just in my head. No. It was never just in your head, it was in your spirit. It was in the quiet shaking of your soul that tried to warn you softly, long before you were ready to hear it. But now, you're ready. And heaven knows that. That's why this truth is unfolding now, not to shake your world, but to set your spirit free. What they hid from you may never be spoken out loud. You may never get a full confession. You may never see the evidence you hoped for. But what you feel right now is more powerful than any proof. Because your spirit has reached a place where peace matters more than permission. Where alignment matters more than attachment. And this part of your journey is no longer about begging people to be honest with you. It's about being honest with yourself. And the truth is, your heart was loyal to someone who could not meet you at that depth. It doesn't make them evil. It doesn't make you foolish. It just means you loved with a fullness they were never prepared to hold. And that is not your fault. You must stop seeing their silence as your failure. You must stop thinking their distance was because you were too much. No, your presence was sacred. Your honesty was light. Your devotion was pure. But not everyone knows how to love something they didn't build, especially when they're still hiding pieces of themselves they never healed. And instead of inviting you in, they kept a wall between you and the truth. They smiled, but the wall remained. They shared just enough to keep you near, but never enough to make you feel safe. And you stayed. Not because you were blind, but because your heart was hopeful. Because your love was rooted in belief, not blindness. You stayed because you thought love could unlock the door. But the lock wasn't on the door. The lock was inside them. So now what? Now you stop knocking. Now you stop waiting for their truth to catch up to your love. Now you stop replaying conversations in your head, looking for something you missed. You didn't miss anything, you saw it all, you felt it all, you just chose compassion over confrontation. And that compassion was not weakness. That compassion was Christ-like. Jesus is close right now. Closer than breath. He isn't telling you to retaliate. He isn't showing you what's been hidden so that you carry offense, he's showing you so you stop carrying confusion. Because you deserve to live light. You deserve to breathe deeply. You deserve to no longer walk on eggshells around someone who wasn't ready to tell you what your soul already knew. This is your liberation moment. A holy reset. A divine pause in the noise of your loyalty. Not to harden you, but to heal you. Let that healing begin now. Not with an answer. Not with a final conversation. But with a simple acknowledgement. I was honest. I was real. I was present. And that is enough. Let that truth rest in your bones. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not to blame for someone else's choice to hide. You are not lost just because someone else refused to walk in truth. You are light. You are chosen. You are wise. You are free. You may still love them. That's okay. But now, you must love yourself more. Enough to no longer carry the weight of their secrets on your back. Enough to no longer shrink your discernment just to maintain someone else's comfort. Enough to say, I don't need the whole story to walk in peace. I just need truth. And heaven gave it to me. You're no longer waiting. You're walking forward. With clarity. With peace. With heaven's full backing. This is not the end of your softness. This is the beginning of your sacred boundaries. And that boundary is not bitterness, it's wisdom. Jesus smiles at your soul now. Because you finally stopped settling for half-truths. And started living from full awareness. Sometimes God doesn't remove the person, He removes your blindness. He allows the silence to grow loud, the smiles to feel strange, the energy to shift so obviously that even your spirit begins to ache for something your mind can no longer ignore. That's what this moment is. Not a heartbreak, but a holy awakening. A sacred unveiling of what your soul has always whispered quietly in the dark, that something wasn't right, that someone was hiding, that love was present, but truth was absent. And you didn't want to admit it because your love wasn't shallow. You weren't looking for flaws. You weren't waiting to be disappointed. You were praying. You were hoping. You were pouring every honest drop of your loyalty into a heart that was never ready to match your depth. And now, instead of God forcing the truth out of their mouth, He whispered it into your spirit. Because when heaven speaks, it doesn't need proof, it brings peace. You're not here to be bitter. You're not here to become cold. You're here to breathe without guessing anymore. To love without questioning your own worth. To feel the divine exhale of relief after carrying their hidden weight for so long. You were never supposed to hold that. You were never meant to question if your presence was too much. You were never meant to dilute your glow just to stay near someone who feared being seen. Your purity triggered something in them that they didn't want to confront. Your clarity highlighted everything they still hadn't faced. And instead of inviting you into their truth, they put on a mask. Not because they hated you, but because they feared that your light would reveal what they weren't ready to deal with. But you stayed. You stayed through their silence. You stayed through their inconsistency. You stayed through the subtle pullbacks, the unexplained mood shifts, the emotional fog they wrapped around you like a test. And even when your intuition screamed, you whispered grace. Even when your heart cracked, you spoke peace. Because that's who you are. You don't love with conditions. You love with conviction. You love with purity. And that love, the same love that was never fully received, is what heaven is now returning to you as truth. Because you deserve it. You deserve to know. You deserve to breathe. You deserve to live without wondering if you're crazy for noticing things no one else wanted to talk about. You deserve to walk in clarity, not confusion. You deserve to feel loved for who you are, not tolerated for how well you pretend not to feel. You were never too sensitive. You were spiritual. You were never overreacting. You were discerning. And now, the very gift they couldn't handle. Your sensitivity, your awareness, your purity, is the same gift heaven is honoring. Because heaven doesn't reward silence. Heaven rewards truth. And your truth has never been clearer. You are not alone in this. Jesus has been beside you the entire time. In every moment you questioned your place in their world. In every moment you wondered why the love felt inconsistent. In every moment you shrank your truth just to stay connected. He was there. And now he's standing even closer, holding you in the exact spot where betrayal once sat. Not to make you strong again, but to remind you that you were always strong, even when you gave from empty places. Even when you extended grace they didn't recognize. Even when you tried to love them into honesty. But honesty is a choice. And you cannot force someone to choose it. You cannot bleed hoping they'll finally be clean. You cannot dim your light hoping it will calm their shadows. You cannot stay in a place where your soul has to beg for something sacred. So this is not a goodbye. This is a release. Release from emotional limbo. Release from waiting for a moment that may never come. Release from carrying a connection that was built on your love but sustained by your silence. Release from the illusion that if you had just done more, they would have finally told you the truth. The truth is, you did enough. You gave enough. You saw enough. And now, heaven has given you the final piece. Not to hurt you, but to heal you. So cry if you must. Mourn what you hoped they'd be. But don't mourn your sensitivity. Don't mourn your capacity to love. Those are your superpowers. And now that those powers are no longer entangled in someone else's secrecy, you are finally free to love without guessing. To speak without walking on emotional glass. To give without losing yourself. Let this be your beginning. The beginning of a season where love meets truth. Where peace meets presence. Where your soul no longer waits for someone to catch up to what God already confirmed. You are not waiting anymore. You are walking. You are rising. You are whole. And no hidden thing can ever dim that. There are moments when heaven speaks not through thunder, not through signs in the sky, but through gentle, undeniable knowing, the kind that settles in your bones, not your mind. You're standing in one of those moments now. The truth isn't loud. It doesn't demand anything. It doesn't accuse or seek revenge. It simply sits beside you and says, "You're not crazy. You're not wrong. You felt it because it was real." And what you felt, what you're still feeling, is not just emotional discomfort. It is a divine signal that something sacred was out of place. Not because you didn't give your all, but because the one you trusted the most chose not to. You didn't ask for perfection. You never demanded explanations. All you ever wanted was presence. Transparency. Consistency. But instead, you were given moments of warmth wrapped in seasons of confusion. You were given promises built on shallow soil. You were handed partial truths wrapped in perfect timing, just enough to keep you hoping, just enough to keep you from walking away, just enough to make you doubt yourself every time the energy shifted and the silence got louder. But now you're here, not because you finally figured it out, but because God finally confirmed it. And His confirmation doesn't come with noise. It comes with peace. You don't need anyone else to validate your discernment. You don't need a confession to walk in clarity. You don't need an apology to be free. Because your soul already knows. And when the soul knows, it doesn't beg, it breathes. The truth is, the person you trusted the most had access to a place no one else could reach. They saw you. Really saw you. They were invited into the holiest places of your heart, and still, they chose to hide. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know what to do with something that didn't require performance. You gave them unconditional safety. And safety can be terrifying to someone who has only known love as something that must be earned. So instead of stepping closer, they pulled away, but carefully. Slowly. Quietly. They pulled away while staying physically present. They didn't leave the room, they just stopped showing up emotionally. They didn't stop speaking, they just stopped telling the truth. And you felt every moment of that shift, but you loved them too much to call it out. You told yourself, they're trying, even when their silence was screaming. You told yourself, they'll come around, even when your heart was slowly being undone. But now, finally, you don't need to pretend anymore. Jesus didn't reveal this to destroy your view of love. He revealed it to heal the way you love. Because love is not measured by how long you stay loyal to confusion. Love is not proven by sacrificing your peace to protect someone else's pride. Love is holy. Love is honest. Love does not thrive in shadows. And the love you gave was real, but it cannot survive in a space that refuses to be real in return. That's why the burden feels lighter now. Not because they told you the truth, but because your spirit finally stopped making excuses for what your soul always knew. So breathe. Not just with your lungs, but with your soul. Breathe into this moment without the need to explain it. You don't owe anyone a justification for choosing peace. You don't owe them your silence anymore. You don't owe your spirit another day of pretending it's okay to live on emotional crumbs. This is where you begin to eat full meals again. Meals of truth. Meals of presence. Meals of clarity. You are not hard to love. You are not difficult to keep. You are not asking for too much. You were simply asking someone to meet you at the level of truth you've already mastered. And when they couldn't, you stayed anyway. And that grace was seen. That patience was recorded. That loyalty will be honored. Not always by people, but always by heaven. You are not foolish for loving them. You are not foolish for believing the best. You are not weak for staying too long. You are strong for finally saying, no more. No more explaining away what doesn't feel right. No more blaming yourself for the silence of others. No more twisting yourself into pieces to protect someone who refused to bring their whole heart. Because now you know. And when you know, you're free. And when you're free, you start to glow again. So let it begin. Let your light rise. Let your discernment be your shield. Let your peace be your home. Let your soul walk forward, not in bitterness, but in brilliance. The brilliance of someone who loved fully, and now chooses to heal fully too. And if they ever decide to come back, don't greet them with bitterness. Greet them with the version of you that no longer needs answers to feel complete. Greet them with the kind of peace that can only come when heaven is your witness. Because now, you're not just free. Now, you're finally whole. This is no longer about them. It's not about what they said or didn't say, what they revealed or kept hidden. This is about you. About your spirit. About your peace. About the sacred journey your soul has taken through seasons of uncertainty, through valleys of emotional confusion, through deserts of silent betrayal, and still, here you are. Whole. Aware. Awake. Not because they gave you closure, but because God gave you clarity. And that clarity didn't come wrapped in confrontation. It came in a moment like this, quiet, divine, undeniable. A moment when heaven stepped between your pain and your patience and said, "Enough. My child deserves peace. My child deserves to know." Not to stir up chaos, not to plant suspicion, but to protect the purity of your heart. Because your heart has always been pure. You didn't love them with strategy. You didn't give your trust with calculation. You gave it the only way you know how, fully. You trusted with your whole chest. You loved with open hands. You stood beside them, not because it benefited you, but because your soul is wired for loyalty. You are someone who shows up, who sees people, who listens even when they don't speak, who stays even when the energy starts to shift. And they felt that. They knew that. And yet, they still chose to hide the part of their life that your spirit already sensed. They still chose silence in the presence of your loyalty. And now, that silence has expired. Now, what was hidden can no longer control the atmosphere of your heart. Because Jesus has stepped into the room, and where Jesus is, truth cannot stay buried. Let this moment be a holy burial. Not of love, but of weight. Bury the version of yourself that kept questioning what you already knew. Bury the guilt you carried for feeling too much. Bury the emotional debt of waiting for someone to tell you what God already confirmed. And as you bury it, speak grace over it. Not bitterness. Not revenge. Grace. Because grace is your language. You were built with it. And when grace and truth walk hand in hand, healing doesn't just happen, it takes root. This is your root moment. The moment where the real you, the healed you, the whole you, takes root in sacred soil. The soil of knowing you were always enough. The soil of knowing your presence was not too heavy, their fear was just too loud. The soil of understanding that being deeply connected to someone doesn't mean they are deeply honest. And that's okay. Because you're no longer holding them responsible for your healing. You're no longer waiting on them to speak what heaven already declared. You're no longer sitting outside a locked door when God just opened a window of revelation. Your soul is walking free now. Not because you have all the details, but because you finally stopped needing them to feel whole. What they hid was never bigger than what you carry. Their secret was never more powerful than your surrender. Their silence was never louder than the voice of God. And that voice is still speaking over you now. It says, "You are not defined by what they didn't say. You are defined by what I've already written. You are chosen. You are clean. You are protected. You are precious. You are seen. You are trusted, not by them, but by heaven. And that trust is everything. Heaven trusts you with discernment, with healing, with light. So now, walk in that light. Not as someone searching for closure, but as someone who has become closure in human form. You are the period at the end of a long chapter. You are the breath after a heavy sentence. You are the yes to yourself that you were always waiting for someone else to give you. So walk on now. Not with fear. Not with regret. But with reverence. With softness. With the silent power of someone who knows their truth, and doesn't need to defend it. You're not the same. You'll never be the same. And that's not loss. That's liberation. What was hidden was never meant to be carried forever. And now that it's no longer hidden from you, you are free. Truly. Finally. Beautifully. Free. There is a softness that returns once you stop fighting for what was never fully real. Not a weakness, but a sacred calm that comes when your soul finally rests from the weight of wondering, the heaviness of holding, the ache of defending love that was never whole. That's what's happening to you now. Your soul is no longer shouting. It's settling. Not in defeat, but in divine realization. That you are not responsible for what they kept from you. You are not the gatekeeper of someone else's silence. You were not created to carry someone's avoidance. You were created to carry light. And when light is forced to share space with secrecy, the soul begins to suffocate. But now, that suffocation is over. The pressure has been lifted. The light inside you is breathing again. And for the first time in a long time, you can feel yourself returning, not to who you were, but to the version of you that was buried under too many compromises. You loved them from a place deeper than they knew how to enter. You showed up in ways that even they weren't prepared for. Your vulnerability was not weakness, it was worship. You didn't just open your heart, you opened your soul. You gave without agenda. You stood beside them not for validation, but because your love knew how to remain. You offered trust like an altar, expecting sacred things to be placed upon it. But instead of truth, they laid down silence. Instead of presence, they offered patterns. Instead of clarity, they gave confusion dressed in politeness. And you accepted it for a time, not because you didn't see, but because your hope was louder than their patterns. But hope without truth becomes a hallway with no door. And eventually, the soul grows tired of pacing. You are tired, not from loving, but from waiting for love to come all the way forward. And now you no longer have to wait. Because what you were waiting for was not their words, it was this awareness. This divine confirmation. This sacred permission to stop pretending that their half-love was enough. To stop questioning the way your body responded every time they pulled away. To stop calling it loyalty when it was self-abandonment dressed in devotion. You weren't wrong for staying. But you're not wrong for leaving either, not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. You're allowed to leave what was never truly with you. And you're allowed to do so without guilt. Without bitterness. Without needing them to understand. Because freedom is not always mutual. Sometimes it's personal. And this freedom is yours. Jesus is still here. Still near. Still whispering. Not to stir old emotions, but to seal your healing. He says, you did not fail them. You honored them. And now, I will honor you. Because God always honors the ones who stay soft through deception. The ones who keep praying while being avoided. The ones who keep forgiving when apologies never come. The ones who offer truth even when surrounded by silence. That's who you are. And now, the reward is not in being proven right, the reward is peace. Not peace that they give you. Peace that heaven now pours directly into you. You don't have to look back. You don't have to hold the door open. You don't have to wait for a better ending. Because this is your ending, not of the love you gave, but of the weight you carried for someone who couldn't return it. And that ending is not tragic. It's transformational. You are shedding skins you were never meant to wear. You are stepping into softness that no longer fears being misunderstood. You are walking with a new kind of strength, the strength that doesn't demand explanations to feel secure. So when the memories return, let them pass. When the longing resurfaces, let it be held by God. When the temptation comes to explain yourself, to send one more message, to seek one more ounce of honesty, pause. And remember, heaven already gave you what they couldn't. And that's all you need. Let this be the part where you rise, not with noise, but with knowing. Let this be the part where you speak softly, walk peacefully, and no longer beg for what was already meant to break. Let this be the part where you return to yourself fully, and choose light over loyalty that cost you your own reflection. The person you trusted the most hid something, yes. But now God has revealed everything. And that is more than enough to walk in peace.